Good afternoon and welcome to the College of Fellows Voices for the Future series. I'm Margaret Ann Hennen, a member of the College of Fellows. And with me today is Vivian Hamilton, APR, Fellow PRSA. Vivian was inducted in the year 2000 into the college. Vivian is a past president of the college, as well as an active member of a number of committees over the last 20 years. She was last year the recipient of the SAGE Award for Mentoring, the annual award given by the College of Fellows. Vivian, thank you for being with me today.
Thanks, Margaret Ann.
You were one of the people who was very instrumental in shaping the Good Fellows program. We know that Joan Kaplan was conceived of this idea, but I know that you worked very closely with her. Can you talk to us a little bit about that experience and when and why you decided to get involved with Joan in that program?
Sure. Actually, we have to take one step back. And
Okay.
yes, when I was on the executive committee of the College of Fellows, we had a couple of issues with applications that just did not answer the questions. And so we weren't able to select those people. And sometimes that made people really unhappy. They said, look, I have all this great experience and all of these wonderful things I've done, and you didn't pick me. Why? And so Joe Epley, the late Joe Epley, who was chair at the time, turned to me and in his best delegating voice said, Hamilton, fix that. And what he wanted was for us to improve our application. So that's actually how I got involved with Joan, because Joan was running Goodfellows, but it was only getting just a few people involved. And so we decided to first improve the application and then to expand the Goodfellows program to make sure everybody knew how to answer the application. And so we had better applicants, better applications, and it has blossomed now into such a great program. And we always tell people, it doesn't mean just because you have a good fellow that you are going to be selected, but you will have a better chance at having a better application because you have somebody to mentor you through the whole process. And that is what I think is the best part of the college, is that we not only are mentoring people in our profession, but we're mentoring those people that we want into the college.
Thank you. And it's a nice way of giving back to the college as well.
Right. And you know, when during selection process, we always say, we're not trying to keep anyone out of the college. We're trying to make sure that they should be in the college. And the only way we can do that, the only way is that application. We don't have anything else. We don't interview people. We just have those 10 pages or however many it is. And that's the only way we know what that person is like, what their work is like, what their mentoring has been, what their leadership has been. And so we have to make sure that those applications are filled out completely. And I learned this wonderful term from Joan. She always said, think about consequences. She was really, think about consequences. Outcomes, not output, outcomes. And today, when I was thinking about this, I looked up the word consequences, and one of the synonyms is value. What value have you given? What consequences have you reaped because of the programs and the projects that you were involved in? And I thought, oh, that's just perfect.
That is perfect. That's good insight. Thank you for that. So mentoring, I know, is important to you. And I know you've done a lot of mentoring or you would not have received this award, because that too is a rigorous process. So would you talk a little bit about perhaps a person or people who have been mentors in your life and why that's so important to you?
I talked about this when I received the SAGE Award, because I moved to Alaska from Florida and I didn't know anyone. Here I was in this very different state and a very different culture and didn't know anybody, and I didn't have a job. I didn't come here with a specific job. So the way I found my job was through the PRSA chapter job bank. And from that one connection, I made another connection and then found a job. And then I got involved in the chapter. And because of my involvement in the chapter, I made this great circle of friends. And we mentored one another because at that time, the chapter, almost all of us were very young and new in our profession. And so we learned on the fly, and it was a great time. And I always remember that those are the people that helped me grow and develop in my career. So I always want to give that back if I can. And now here I've been a member of this chapter since 1981. No, 1982. And I still try to stay engaged. I am known as the nudger because I'm always nudging someone to seek their APR or to get into the leadership development chain. We have a wonderful board development team here, and it starts out with recruiting people to work just on committees, and then escalates to committee chair, and then board involvement, and then finally as an officer. And I'm always trying to find those new candidates for that continuity in our chapter, and also find those people that I think have something to give back to us. And so I really enjoy mentoring. Even I don't even mind being called the nudger.
And I'm sure you nudge in the kindest, most gracious way possible.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I say things like, "Have you thought about getting your APR?" And they'll say, "Well, I've thought about it." And I'll say, "And?" I'm like, well, I'm too busy." "Yeah, right. Weren't you too busy when you did such and such? Or weren't you too busy when you did this?" You're always going to be busy. Just, take it one step at a time. And usually I get a good response. I have two right now that are working on it.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Thank you for that.
yeah.
Can you talk about someone who was a mentor to you, specifically that has made a difference in your career or did as a brand new PR person?
I think the person that had the most influence on me was actually the CEO of the Alaska Railroad. I worked there for a number of years, and he was the most straightforward, most I can't think of the right adjectives to describe him. He just was a very simple person in his work. He didn't want things to be complicated, and he always said, "I am not doing anything unless I have a communications person on the team." He believed strongly in it. He had come out of the oil industry and had been trained through Exxon. And it's surprising years later that Exxon got accused of not being a very good communicator here in Alaska. But he was someone that believed strongly that the public relations people had to be at the table, had to be there to hold the organization accountable, to be the conscience, to talk about, okay, yeah, we can do this operationally. We have the finances, we have the human resources, but is it the right thing to do? And I admired that so much. And he helped me learn how to include that in every conversation we had in the organization.
Wow, that's very unusual and very special, and especially when you were starting out. Today
Mhm.
it's more common, but that was a foresighted individual. No
Yeah.
wonder he was one of your mentors. Could you share with our audience some of the highlights of your career, the kinds of things that you either did or would have put on your College of Fellows application? I know as I'm doing things now, even though I'm in the college, I'll think, oh, that would have been a great case study for the College of Fellows application. So could you share some of those stories with us?
Sure. Two things come to mind. First is that when I first got here, I worked for the Trans-Alaska Pipeline, Alaska Pipeline Service Company. And the pipeline had only started in 1977, and I came here in 81. So it was really a new company. And it was the first Arctic pipeline to have been developed since World War II. So it was all kinds of new technology to learn, all kinds of I didn't know anything about oil. And then after I left there, I went to work for the Alaska Railroad, a very, very old industry. that had all kinds of growing pains because it was trying to come into this new century, from the 1800s and now into the 2000s. And so it was, those two organizations were so different, but they had something in common, and that is that all the people that I met along the way, I learned all I had to do was ask. So, can you tell me what your job is and how you do it? Because people want to talk about what they do. And it made our employee relations, our employee communications much easier because people wanted to talk about themselves. So we had some of the most robust, I think, employee communications at the pipeline and at the railroad because we ask people what they do and how they do it and its place within the organization. And I think that I used a couple of those examples, but also I used examples about uh, how we helped inform and educate the community about our work. People were very fascinated with the pipeline, and so that was easy. And the railroad, people didn't know very much about it, so we made it a point of informing and educating them about how it worked. And there are, we called them foamers, and it's the Friends of Modern Railroading or something like that. And they follow railroads religiously, but other people, it's just out of sight, out of mind, unless you get stopped at a railroad crossing. And so it was really exciting to teach people about uh, the freight industry and passenger services and things like that. And you say, people are interested in industry. Yeah, we would have Railroad Week. We started this Railroad Week every year. We'd invite people down to the railroad and let them ride on the train and do a little circuit around the yard and uh, the rail yard. And people would just flock down there, and they wanted to see all the equipment and they wanted to walk through it. And you think about this with like the military does this when they have their big programs and they invite people onto the military bases. But railroading is just as popular. And it was so fun to see people sort of go, wow. And in Alaska's case, the railroad was owned by the state and run as a private corporation. So people had that what they felt like was a personal relationship with it. They owned it. So it was kind of cool.
That's amazing. I want to come and visit the railroad. And I would think the railroad was extremely important in Alaska even today. It's a
Oh, yeah.
major means of transportation.
Transportation, but more so in freight because we don't have a lot of
Mhm.
roads, and so we
Sure.
do move things by freight here, and
Mhm.
and a lot of food, a lot of beer.
All the necessities of life.
Yes.
So, Vivian, what advice would you give to someone who's considering applying for the College of Fellows in the future?
Well, I actually have two people I'm working with right now who are trying to put together their applications. And what I've told them is the word I said earlier, the Joan's favorite word, consequences. You need to demonstrate consequences of your work. And don't assume that we understand your business. You might say, I work for the largest telecom organization. Okay, but I don't know anything about telecom. So you have to somehow or another explain your business a little bit just so that I understand that why your project was important or significant. Besides the consequences, you need to talk about your role. A lot of times we are the person that puts our company first, or we put our leaders first, or we put our nonprofit, if we're working for a nonprofit, we put those things first and we don't talk about ourselves. But this is the one time where you have to say I. That old, there's no I in team. Well, this is one time where your team is not applying, you are applying, and you have to get over yourself and just say, I did this. But don't oversell. If you weren't the one that did it, don't claim it because it's important to have the right ownership of things. And if you were part of a team, then you can say that too, but just explain what your part was and what you did and why it was successful.
Good advice. Is there anything that you wanted to share in addition to the things you've already shared with our listeners?
I think the biggest lesson I learned in all of my career, and it's still true today, is with very few exceptions, most of us are not doing anything that is close to brain surgery. Very seldom are we going to be in a situation that's life and death. If you are, disregard this, but otherwise, don't rush to make a decision. Take a few minutes, take a breath, give yourself time to think, to gather your wits, and think about what you're doing. Because again, it's not critical that you have an answer instantly. What is important is that you have a good answer. And so take your time and sort of run the scenarios through your brain and realize that sometimes doing nothing is an answer.
Excellent advice, as always, Vivian. Thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing your insights. I appreciate it, and I look forward to our continued relationship as the years go by. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Margaret Ann.